Hello everyone, my name is Matthew East. I'm registered as a provisional psychologist and have training in training evaluation methods and some work psychology. I was originally trained in these methods, which is similar to what we would expect from a person who works at an organisation such as RAND, and that's what I need to be seen as when I'm talking about things in a military context. By a gentleman called Eric Fine. Now, Eric Fine's background was that he originally worked for the US Air Force. During the Cold War, he was in charge of a mid-range nuclear ballistic missile, which he took around Russia. These days, he works at the University of Southern Queensland. He taught me research methodology. He was my supervisor for my honours thesis. And I took a different route while doing my honours degree. I chose to completely avoid worrying about grades. I realised that there's a tendency for people to chase titles, chase grades, chase performative standards rather than chasing results. And during my honours degree, what I did is that I used that time to deeply learn from this man, because I realised he really knew what he was talking about, and I have a knack for this. And during that time, I reorganised the University of Southern Queensland using my knowledge of research methodologies. And I'm currently using my knowledge of research methodologies to adjust institutions. I am also a veteran. I attended the Naval College when I was 19 years old and was bastardized there. Since then, I have been around people who have been engaged in special forces work. Well, not engaged. Actually, no, it's been that I've been a member of the cyber warfare community. I have worked in espionage. Not mainly, I'd say in the corporate sector, and I would say that I have a bizarre set of skills which allow me to provide some quite useful analysis. So, what's going on with the SAS in Australia and what needs to change? The SAS committed several war crimes in Afghanistan. What happened, we know this from the testimony of a gentleman called David McBride. David McBride is currently in prison, not too far from where I am. I'm currently an enemy of the state, although things seem to be improving, and I am confined to living in a homeless shelter, and I've been harassed terribly by police and the intelligence apparatus who I've been around. Him and I are both working collaboratively to try and address cultural issues in defense. I understand special forces relatively well. I understand how institutions function really well. I study their behavior. I've studied how I've provided the appropriate interventions through my videos. And today we're continuing on with that process, and we're moving on to providing what we need to do to restructure the special forces in Australia. And to do this, I'm going to begin describing how special forces communities function. To do this, I'm going to use examples from the United States, and then I'm going to describe that situation in Australia. Now, in the United States, they have a very different economy and very different military to us. They have this military which kind of has multiple branches. It's very large, it's very complex, and what's happened over time is that they've developed all these different groups of special forces. Now, these groups were developed historically, first starting during the Second World War with the Green Berets, and, well, I think they may have come up around afterwards. There are going to be nuances. This is a draft video. Now, they have all these different special forces branches. Okay, they're a very large country, except they have double ups as well. Okay, the most famous example of this is the Marine Raiders and the Navy SEALs, because again, these are organizations who independently came up with their own branches of special forces, and then following this, they've been able to see how they behave. They've been able to watch how the training has resulted in operational effectiveness or a lack of operational effectiveness. And they've watched what they've done, right? And there's been study on it. There has not been enough study on it. And there has been a movement in the United States at the moment where they're looking at kind of condensing different branches of special forces groups and potentially removing branches of special forces. Okay? They may not do that because the United States has a different operational tempo to us. The United States will be the primary force which will be engaged in warfare in the Pacific should there be a war with China, and they need to constantly be posturing themselves to be ready for that kind of operation. They are in a different situation strategically to us, to Australia, and therefore their considerations for how they manage their human resources, because we're going to be going through some human resources problems today, are different. Okay? An example of this for them, they have this fighter called the F-22. It's slightly outdated, it's exceedingly expensive, but they can't decommission it and they can't make more of them because if they have a war with China, that's the only fighter which can be used to in that specific role. So they need to keep it around. So for them, they have all these different special forces branches. For them, they just need a shit ton of people. So they don't necessarily have the freedom that we have to condense and reorganize our defense force as they do. As they are in a different position. We are fortunate enough strategically to be in a position where if we wished to, we could actually completely disband an entire regiment if we wanted to. I'm not recommending that, but it's something that strategically, based on our needs, we can do. The United States would struggle to do that. Now, returning to the point, the Navy SEALs, what they realized is that these different branches, over time, while they have these double-ups, the cultures of them produce different categories of soldier. Now, recently, there was an operation by Delta forces in Venezuela where they kidnapped the president of Venezuela, right? Historically, for a large period of time, that work was done by Navy SEALs and DevGRU, which is their SEAL Team 6. And the use of Delta forces in that operation has brought in a public attention in the United States to this specific problem. Okay, why do we have these double-ups of special forces? There seems to be cultural problems which occur in certain branches which do not occur in others, and it seems to be based on how these people are, the cultures of these specific branches. And this is a problem that we have in Australia. There is a massive cultural difference between our two branches of special forces. There's one group called the Commandos, and there's another group called the Special Air Service Regiment. The Special Air Service Regiment is a group which originally formed in Britain, and we kind of copied their system because our military is in many ways interchangeable with the British, and that's where we get most of our structures and orientation from. We are so similar. Our military is so similar to the British that we are capable of just having rotational placements. You can put an Australian major through a transfer program in a British regiment, and they'll be able to get along fine. It's very similar. They'll have different software, but culturally, the way our institutions run is quite similar to the British. Now, the SAS, their role is to do deep reconnaissance. They're most famous for having these small teams of people who go deep behind enemy lines. They figure things out. If they need to, they can attack a specific target, and they gather information and they report this information back to command. The original idea is that we can get these very intelligent people, and they are intelligent, these independent people who can act with autonomy. And that's a very important word here to do this role. They need to be able to go behind enemy lines and find targets, identify them, and destroy them without necessarily having communications with command. That was very important historically when information technology was not as sophisticated as it is now. We now have better ability for that communication. It's still an important aspect to be able to have that independence in these operations. I'll keep it on point. I can elaborate more on that. But we have these people, they do this. We have the commandos who have a different role, okay? And the commandos' role is to do large scale, they're more of a heavy weapon, if that makes sense. You have a whole heap of them, so they have to get along in larger groups better. They're more collectivist. They are meant to be a force which attacks another large force, potentially. While the SAS, they're more there to attack specific targets. Both groups are meant to engage in asymmetric warfare. I think the days of being able to do operations behind enemy lines such as World War II are over, so I think a large amount of the role historically that we consider what the commandos were meant to do has changed as well. But I'll leave that up to the people who have a better understanding of these institutions' specific capabilities and decide if a reorientation is needed for commando. I don't understand commando as well as I understand SAS, and we're talking about SAS today because I need to talk about SAS and the Delta Forces. So in the United States, the Delta Force is a group of people who, it's their version of SAS. So what happened is that there was a gentleman who had this very unassuming temperament. Okay? I wish I remembered his name at this moment. This very unassuming temperament. This very humble, nice guy. Okay? He's famous for it. Continuing on with the video, at the moment, one of the things I've realized is that because I'm kept in a box and I'm in this situation where I have to deal with a lot of information warfare, it's difficult for me to do retrospective research and be able to fill in blanks with what I do. So a large amount of my stuff ends up just being released as a draft. I can't trust the information which I get from my work, and that means that whilst I have a deep knowledge of these things, the same way that we would expect any expert in their field to be able to look at their textbooks, check up on their facts before they cite them, as they do with their reference list at the end of any academic article. Because I end up in this information, I'm kept in a box in an information warfare sense, I can't trust specific details I give out, such as people's names, because that often gets changed. But the gentleman who started the Delta Force, he is considered, like, these institutions take after the people who make them. They are often reflections of that. And it was something which was designed, okay? So Delta Force was an institution which was designed from the bottom up based on information which had already been learned. And not necessarily learned, but this gentleman just had the right kind of orientation to make sure he got a group of these very level-headed, mature operators, okay? And these people have this reputation for being able to just do the work. They are very secretive. They are the opposite of what we see at the Australian War Memorial, where we made this big song and dance about the SAS, okay? So the SAS in Australia are not as secretive as Delta Force. No one knows anyone in Delta Force. Delta Force is just Delta Force, all right? Now you contrast that with that war memorial, and you contrast that with what the SEALs do, okay, where they're this very public group, at least at this time. And to an extent, that's all right? There's some benefits to this. Now, the culture of Delta Force is a contrast to the Australian SAS, and it's a contrast to the American Navy SEALs. Right? So the Navy SEALs have a similar group which has a similar set of capabilities to Delta Force, and that's called the Navy Developmental Group, and that's called DevGRU. It's also called SEAL Team 6. And what happens is that people in the US Navy who are Navy SEALs, they become SEALs, and the people who are the best get tapped on the shoulder and they said, hey mate, you get to be part of this special team and we are really good at hitting targets. Okay? And that's their group of that. And they're considered elite. They have what's called a tiered system. Right? Because they have such a large amount of these different organizations, they have too many. They need to get rid of some and merge them together for operational reasons. Like it's just too fucking expensive. So maybe operational is not the correct term. But they have this problem, okay? We've got Delta Force who have this different culture, and then we have DevGRU. And how did these different cultures take place, okay? And this is kind of contrasted. This is something that we're seeing at the moment because in Australia, we had war crimes committed by the SAS, but not the commandos. In the United States, they had a famous situation. There's a movie with Matt Damon in it. Again, it's difficult for me to go back and check on this information because I'm kept in a box in an information warfare sense. So any title I say to someone might be completely wrong. So, and what happened is that they fucked up the operation. They made a movie about it, and they lied about key facts in that movie and in the reports. And what actually happened is that these guys didn't listen to the instructions that they were given. They were told to go in on foot. Instead, they went in on helicopter, alerting everyone in the area that they were going to be there. And then a whole heap of people died. And it just showed the difference in attitude, temperament, and what these different processes of selection and the ongoing culture and perpetuating factors which keep producing people like this, these soldiers who are very important. And just because they I'm making criticisms about it does not mean I do not respect these men, right? I dislike calling what is obvious misbehavior, childish behavior, or immaturity. I see these people as being selected, groomed, and built in these cultures and institutions. And as a person who is how do I put this? Unconsensually a military leader in Australia, right? I was trying to break from this role for some time, but unfortunately, the forces which keep me oppressed and the situations I have to attend to, and seeing as I seem to be the right person in the right time with the right skills, this is my I see this as my responsibility. I need to say that those military leaders are responsible for the condition of these troops, the skills they have, their temperament, and the atrocities they have committed are the responsibility of a history of military leaders who have not been able to create institutions which are engaged in a continuous learning cycle and able to take on science and information from the outside and incorporate that in to better their processes, better the condition of their troops, the welfare of their troops, and their operational effectiveness. There are barriers which are a result of the authoritarian nature of these institutions which stop knowledge work from taking place. Okay? The end state I am chasing for the Australian military is overall, so we look at how a strategist looks at all the different things that we use for planning an operation and what targets we choose. So there tends to be a big table at the bottom. You have things that you hit and destroy, so things at the top no longer function. For example, you destroy petrols, oils, and lubricants at the bottom. Their cars no longer work, so you've effectively destroyed that, and now you've destroyed the enemy's ability to advance and attack you. The same way that we have a series of these targets and these things at the bottom, the culture of the military stops people like myself social scientists from being able to go in, identify what these things are at the bottom which we need to change and fix, so the rest of the institution begins to function. Okay? It's this authoritarian disposition of these people in charge, the power of command, the pseudo-fascist, proto-fascist disposition of these people, which is causing the problem. Okay? It is a cultural problem. Social scientists exist. You are a person. There are people scientists. We're able to fix these problems. Now, it's just that we can't, because the people that I have to work with are idiots. Returning to the point. Now, these Navy SEALs fucked up, okay? And when we start looking at it, these people in charge of these institutions who get to meet all these different people in these different branches and sort of seeing what these branches are producing, at the moment they're looking at this situation and they're going, okay, how do we deal with this problem? Now in Australia, we have this in a bigger way than the United States, all right? And whilst in the United States, in my opinion, they do not need DevGru and the Navy SEALs. I think they should be folded up. I think they should be incorporated into the Marine Raiders as separate regiments because they're going to be culturally different. I think they should still be called Navy SEALs. I think they should still attend Navy basic training and then have a bridging course for Marine Corps should they fail their selection, so they can have a career more aligned with the job that they applied for rather than being ripped off by the Navy. Because again, there is this culture of bastardization and ruining people and not respecting the human component of their work because of this sadomasochistic nature of special forces. But you've got this situation, and we've got these guys in the SAS, and we've got an entire regiment which fucked up, okay, and is not up to standard. Like, we had them commit war crimes, and we had our Chief of Defence Force take off their meritorious service thing that they got in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's been a difficult situation to contend with because, and I don't think punishing these people is the solution. I think removing people from the SAS is certainly a great solution. Punishment should certainly take place individually, but let's not be angry at just people based on association with this institution. They are going to need to be dealt with though. Okay, so how are they doing this at the moment, and what is the shortfalls of it? What's happening at the moment is that the military is trying to sort of level out their special forces. We've got the commandos, who are a very collectivist group. We've got the SAS, who have a very much a warrior, we fight for glory, individualist culture, right? And we need them to be more individualistic than the commandos, because they need to be, and this is going to piss off the commandos, they need to be more intelligent as well, they need to be more independent, and they need to be able to fight behind enemy lines, and they need to be something else. And they need to be held to account, but they need to have more autonomy than commandos. What's happened is that we had a group of people who took too much autonomy, not so much too much autonomy, who had autonomy, who had the capacity for unlimited violence, and who enjoyed the process of violence, and had this warrior culture going around killing civilians, violating all their processes. And we had them doing things like blooding. So we had them go through, the SAS guys, as a rite of passage, would kill a civilian or someone who they presumed may have been an enemy. They did all kinds of horrific things, okay? Australian soldiers committed unnecessary war crimes which were counterproductive to the overall mission in these countries. And this is the other thing. Like, you can't have these individual units behaving like this, like, because it was a hearts and minds mission, and if you start killing civilians, you destroy that. At the same time, I can kind of understand why they did it, and they were effective in pacifying their regions. They were not that pacifying the regions wasn't the point. The point was to rebuild a country. Now, we have to deal with this. What the military did is that they made it so that instead of people going for individual selection to commando or SAS, they're now having joint selection, and then people get assigned to the different ones. Maybe that's useful. Maybe that is useful, okay? I think the solution is that the SAS, as individuals, and this needs to be said, have to be more capable soldiers than commando. And we need to turn SAS into Delta Force, who are meant to be this professional group, because at the moment they are not a professional group whatsoever. So far, I have described how we came to the situation where we are at a crossroads with Australia's Defence Force, mainly the Special Forces. I now want to describe what I would do if I was to design Australian Special Forces from the ground up. Okay, we didn't have a history, it was just us making something. What I would do is I'd have a two-tier system, all right? I'd have an A team and a B team, okay? And you go through the B team to get to the A team. So there isn't all this crap that we have with the fighting between Commando and SAS. The ego's settled. You go through one thing, right? People who are best at certain tasks, if we need to have individual groups, right? They get selected from this group of people who have passed the selection process, so we know are very good soldiers, and those people get trained sort of how I understand commandos are trained, okay? What would happen is that because we are a relatively small country, we are a middle power, so let's not undervalue what we can produce here. Let's be optimistic. We can do some pretty incredible things, and we've done so in the past. But what I would do is that I would create something where we have a lot of really good soldiers. They can do some unconventional warfare if we need to push them into that, and there's that little bit of flexibility, okay? So it's like the Army Rangers plus, which is what the Army Rangers are a force that the United States have. They are sort of fill this kind of strange niche in the taxonomy of these groups, because they're sort of similar to Australian clearance divers in that they participate in activities which we would sometimes describe as special forces. They pass a selection process, but they kind of fill either a role which is very niche, such as clearance divers, who are responsible for really blowing up landmines, blowing up explosives and that kind of thing, rather than Navy SEALs, who say engage in unconventional warfare and hit targets, okay? Clearance divers are not really meant to be engaged in too much small arms fire. They're meant to go in, blow something up, and then go home. They're not meant to be engaged in that, right? And if they do get engaged in it, they're trained for it and they can do it. They're very tough and capable people. Don't for a second think I don't think these guys aren't very tough people. And I'm happy to give them an honorary title of Special Force, but in the taxonomy it doesn't quite work. Now, the Army Rangers in the United States kind of fill that same kind of space. They're this group of very capable soldiers who pass a selection course, and they're there to support other special operations which go on. and conduct operations by themselves. And because they are known to be very good soldiers, they will be assigned to on more difficult operations. Okay, that's something which provides a lot of flexibility. And seeing as we don't know where the next conflict is going to be for Australia, that's a good idea. And that's what I understand commando to be. Okay, what I would do is I'd have us go through that. Okay, and people get tapped on the shoulder and asked to move on to SAS if that's their thing. Another way of doing it would be for everyone to be in this commando group, and then we just have specific specializations which go off from that. Or another option is to have commando, SAS, and something similar to what they have in the Navy SEALs, which is a DevGru, which is where we have the people who are very special and very capable people who get who get asked to join it. And they are kind of like, the superheroes, the biggest badasses there are. And then we can use that for propaganda. Because if we have the best go to the SAS, who we're trying to turn into Delta Force, we can't do that. Right? It's inappropriate for Delta Force people do not get their faces across the war memorial in displays. Okay? They don't get turned into national heroes. With commandos and the SAS, a large amount of the conflict that we're having is political. It's not based on what would actually make the most sense strategically. My view, the way that my ideal solution is, we have a selection process, people go to commando, people who then get tapped on the shoulder to go to SAS. That would take that allows us to have a more mature special forces, similar to what the US realized with Navy SEALs. They realized it's better to have people who are members of the Marine Corps, and then those people who are who want to be involved in special forces, who are experienced soldiers, then go to selection, and then they become Marine Raiders. What we could do in Australia is that we have commando, and those who are particularly good move on to Special Air Service Regiment, which would function like a Delta Force. The downside to that process is that the training pipeline would be exceedingly long, okay? And I don't think by the time people were in the SAS, they would be in their mid-30s. And maybe that's the solution. Maybe that's the solution if we want to have these people who we can trust to engage in these special operations behind enemy lines. If we're going to have people who have this ability and discretion to use violence, it makes a lot of sense that they are very seasoned soldiers rather than people that we're just that we're putting into a regiment. I think this is the best possible solution. However, something needs to be done, and at the moment it's more important that action is taken, people are held accountable, and someone does an intervention which produces some benefit than no benefit at all. And just creating a Navy something similar to a Navy DevGru, so that we're able to continue to have the a group of people who function as ideological figures for military, because these people, the heroes that we have in SAS, they sort of function as saints, and I'll explain how the social stories and how that functions when I go inside there in a few minutes. But something needs to be done to stop this fighting between SAS and Commando so Special Forces can function, and something needs to be done to adjust SAS so that we can trust them to complete operations and that they're not going to commit war crimes. The best solution I can come up with for that, everyone goes to Commando, and what ends up happening is those who are mature, older, and we consider as responsible people to use violence and we can trust with the decision to kill people independently, because that's the job of SAS. Move on there. That's the end of the briefing today. I hope everyone has a good one. Cheers.